How's everybody doing this morning? Wow, man, I'm honored, I'm humbled to be here. I'm always thankful for any time that I get to spend at Q events because I feel like Q is my extended family for real. I actually have some members of my real family here sitting front row to help calm my nerves and anxiety here. So can you guys wave? Usually on Sundays, you'll catch me Sunday mornings at my mom's house with my sisters, my brother-in-law, my nephew, just having some coffee, having some really good conversations. But I know they didn't allow coffee in here. Sorry we couldn't do that for you guys. But I'm just going to consider this pretty much keeping with tradition, right? Because Sunday morning for me is family time, and I feel at home right here with Q, with my Q family. So my name is Ed, for those of you guys that may not know me, and I want to talk to you guys a little bit today about this idea, this concept of multiple representations to make better connections between the concept of math that I've learned as a math educator, but just as an educator, period, and how this organization, this thing that we call Q, has played a huge role in this. So I hail from the Central Valley. Where are my Central Valley peeps at? Can I throw up? Yeah! Central Valley, born and raised, eating tacos is how I spend most of my days. So I actually grew up in this really small agricultural town of Early Mark, California. My mom worked in the grape fields before she got a job at the district office. So we were around education. That's where I fell in love with education. I was educated by great teachers there. In the Central Valley, I taught high school math and computer science for about 15 years. Before leaving into my new position today. So I've been out of the classroom for about 2.5 years, but I still work in education. I help teachers pass their CSET math prep tests to get into education. So I'm still working with math and computer science and still very involved in Q. So I noticed that as soon as I mentioned math, like a couple people said, like, I didn't sign up for this crap. I'm gonna head out the door, right? Because math triggers some people, right? You guys agree with that? If you nod if you agree with that. Math is a trigger for some people. I know it. You don't have to nod your head because I know it because I've taught it for 15 years. I've seen it. I've felt it, right? I've seen students and adults get so overwhelmed with anxiety that you just have to let them stand outside of the room, and it's a mental block, right? If you follow Joe Bowler's research, you know this, right? If you're not, do this. It just stirs up anxiety, fear, hatred, maybe because of an experience they've had in a math class with a math teacher, unfortunately, sometimes, right? Convincing people because of this math trauma that they're not a math person, right? And they're gonna go the different route, even choosing their majors that completely avoid math, right? And choosing their careers, dictating what their careers are. Can you throw up a finger if you've felt that way before, or if you know someone that feels that way? The finger that you throw up is different, that's up to you. But this is on Facebook Live, so just watch out. Get the check with. So that's a lot of people, and that angers me. That should anger you too, right? It angers me that so many people are feeling that way in the math class, and it hurts me to think that I was ever the cause of some of that anxiety for these kids. Because I've felt anxiety. How many of you guys have felt anxiety before, whether it's that or whatever? And it's not fun. And to think that I went into this profession to be great and that I may have caused some trauma to kids is something that I've had to deal with. But I'm giving myself a break because I feel like we've only been served one representation of math. And it's a big misrepresentation of math, like this crap. Right? Do a bunch of problems, do the odd ones, right? No contextless, no story, with the emphasis on getting the right answer and doing it quickly. No wonder people don't dig this, right? That doesn't sound like fun. But I'm not gonna lie, I played this game because someone taught me to play this game. That's what I got my math degree in, is playing this game. But there is hope because math has been misrepresented for so far, and it's so much more beautiful than that. We can do amazing things in the math class. And this idea of multiple representations allows us to give experiences to our students that make deeper connections to relate different representations, the ones that they have, given access to some representation to relate them to one another, so that they can elevate the perception and see the bigger picture that, I see where this fits in, and I see why we're doing this. For example, there's a lot of really amazing people doing things. Mary Barassa from Canada, right? Any Canadians here? No? All right, love Canadians. Mary Barassa represents math by showing students 4 images and asking them to choose which one doesn't belong, just make sure that they justify which one doesn't belong, right? So I shared this out and some of the folks contributed. We had some of the folks, actually my friend Mariana Hernandez, gave this to her class. She said, hey, thanks for the warm-up activity. We're doing this. She's from Redwood City. And she said, so top right corner, a couple students said, oh, this is the only one that's in a packet. It's a rectangular shape. It has less amount. The top left is the sriracha. This is the only Asian one. It has a green lid and it has character writing. And then the bottom left, it says it's all red and it's an American fast food hot sauce and that it's made of glass. And then the bottom right, because these kids are from San Jose and that's where this place, San Jose people? This place is, it's the only orange one, it's homemade and it's the special sauce, right? So the wonderful thing about this is, who's right? Everybody. Has that been the case in the single representation of math that we've been given? So what a wonderful way to start your day to shift this culture of this crap that we've been served up, right? So another mathematician, Annie Fetter, from Minnesota, represents math with 2 simple yet powerful and amazing questions. What do you notice? What do you wonder? You might see a common theme here going on, maybe that I have an obsession. So I threw this out on Twitter and Facebook, and a couple of people noticed some things and wondered some things. Amy Downs said, wonder if you have more containers than lids. I didn't think that went through. My buddy JJ said, I noticed the clock is not moving. Crystal Chavez said, I know it's 11:45 before lunch. I noticed you have some yummy orange sauce. I wonder what the ingredients are, and I wonder what this has to do with your keynote. So that 11:45 might matter. And then Paul Gordon, my buddy Paul, where's he at? Said, I noticed your countertops and range have not been updated since 1963. And I wonder if I can have that bottle. Dude, I'm renting, bro. I'm renting, dude. All right. So that problem right there, that's a super low floor, high ceiling. It could just be turned into a division problem, right, for middle school kids, or it could go into a volume of a cylinder problem, right, depending on where you take it, right? But everybody was involved, and if you knew what that hot sauce was, or maybe you piqued some curiosity, what's the worst thing that could happen? Piquing some curiosity in math class. The visual patterns are probably one of my favorite things, right? If you guys are familiar with the visual patterns, Fawn Nguyen and Joe Bowler do these a lot. I never knew math looked like this. Did you guys grow up with math like this? Mine looked like that other crap before. So you can have middle school to high school kids analyzing this, looking at how does this pattern grow? What do you think the 4th shape would be, the 10th shape, the 25th shape? What would the nth shape be? You could even do that. You don't have to do all of that, but you could. What would the 0 shape be? Just look at the patterns and tell me what you see. But really, there's a lot of algebra going on right here. Because one of the best tools for multiple representations is something, if you guys are familiar with like Edu protocols, right? You got some Edu protocol fans? Like the frere a friend. So think about this one as like frere a function, right? Let's make connections between different representations of this function, which is linear algebra, But instead of giving you a 1 through 51 odd of some boring crap that you're not going to do, it doesn't stick to anything, show them like some pictures, the sequence. Let me find the 0 one, show me a graph represented as a graph, then show me the table. Don't go directly to the table, and then tell a story. How this function, y equals 1 plus 3x, is represented by a really crazy math teacher from the Central Valley that had 1 bottle of orange sauce in his fridge, and every time he goes to San Jose, he buys 3 bottles for his Q-peeps. Right? What I do now, I work now for, most of the time I work for Brown University Computer Science Department, which is crazy, but that has a lot to do with Q and Twitter, and that's the reason, that I work there. It blows my mind about that. But what I do with Brown and CS and Bootstrap is all about multiple representation, so showing that you can represent math through computer science with something that kids totally struggle with of the order of operations. So instead of using PEMDAS, oh, sorry, I threw up a little bit in my mouth. PEMDAS is my moist, if that makes sense to people. So you can, who knew that you can show with order of operations, you can take something like the distance formula, which kids really struggle with, show it visually, right? So they can actually see the order of operations and have conversations of that instead of following lockstep like a robot into this procedural garbage of PEMDAS. That is one way of finding the answer, but not all of the ways of finding the answer. And then taking that into code and converting that into computer science as a representation of math so that they can eventually use the distance formula to create their own video game using the distance formula that finds out when objects collide with each other. That's when you can see math come alive, right? Not through single representations. So that's really reminded me a lot of this with my work here is that I've come to this conclusion that I've spent a lot of years getting my degree, but I got my degree without knowing a whole lot of math. I knew how to play this one type of game. And those skills that allowed me to play that game didn't transfer well to a lot of other areas of my life. But I'm learning a lot more now, and it's scary, but now it's fun. It's fun. I'm like, oh, wow, I just blew my mind. That shape can look like algebra. That's where slope comes from. That's where the y-intercept comes from. That's amazing to me. And to show that with kids, to share that with kids and to share that with adults is really powerful. So I'm excited about this. Now, I just dropped quite a few Twitter peeps there, right? And you may have noticed and wondered something about that. And you may have noticed that they were all amazing female mathematicians. And you may have, like me, wondered, I wonder how many female math teachers I had in my career. And actually just noticed this week, I don't think from 7th grade on, I didn't have any. But I'm used to learning from intelligent, strong women, my sisters, my mom, right? All my Q peeps. And I wonder if that is part of the barrier also, and that it's this idea of multiple representations applies to way more than just math. And I think it does. I know it does. Because we can make deeper connections when we relate different representations to one another and elevate our perception of whatever it is in education to see the bigger concept. So this starts me thinking about my first year as a teacher. I started thinking about this, like, how does this apply to everything else? How many first-year teachers in the classroom? We got a couple. Yeah. And you're at Q? Oh my God. How jealous are you, the rest of you guys, that you didn't start Q when you're year 1? Like, dude, I wish I could go back in time. You gotta do it for the kids, Marty, for the kids. Right? How many of you guys, you could go back and introduce Q to your first year teacher self? I know I wish that would have prevented so much pain, so much struggle, so much loneliness, it would just give me more fun and allow me to have more fun in my job like I do now. So my first year, I didn't have a lot of wins. My first year teaching, I had one though. I started teaching 2 different math classes. They gave me 2 math classes, and they gave me Algebra 1 and then Algebra 1 SI, which was Algebra 1 to Spanish-speaking students. So it was a class, I had 5 sections of Algebra 1, 1 section of SI. All completely Spanish-speaking students. The interesting thing about that is that for some reason they thought that I knew Spanish. Because I didn't know growing Spanish. They didn't teach us Spanish growing up, right? We didn't get taught Spanish because you were supposed to speak Spanish at school, right? That was the representation of school. You weren't supposed to do that. The only Spanish I knew, my friends used to make fun of me and call me a pocho. That's what they called me growing up, you pocho. And the only Spanish I knew was the Spanish I got while I was slinging pan dulce in my grandma's panaderia to all the people that worked in the fields. And so I noticed a bunch of people were like, dude, this guy just dropped a bunch of Spanish words on us right now. I don't know what he's talking about. So, a little bit of slang too, right? You get the pocho one now? Yeah. You guys are fun. So, what was different about these 2 classes? The first class was pretty much the same game that I had been playing that I was good at. I thought I was really good, teaching kids lockstep, step by step what's going on. It was frustrating. Didn't understand why they weren't learning this and that. That was 5 periods of that. The other section was fun. But why was it fun is because these kids had something that I wanted to learn about them. I wanted to learn Spanish from them while I was in the class. And they taught me Spanish. And I made myself vulnerable to make mistakes and mispronounce stuff. And they laughed. There was a lot of laughter going on in that class. On my expense, all on my expense. I was like, okay, I'm about to be fluent, though. I don't know what you're talking about. We had kind of a barter system of hey, an agreement. I'm going to teach you math. You're going to teach me Spanish. That sound good? Muy bien. Right? I learned so much Spanish. I'm fluent to this day. I probably know more Spanish than my mom because she hasn't practiced now. And I'm really proud of that. Enough to the point where I ended up starting to have conversations with my grandma on my dad's side, who I'd never spoken to in her language before because she only knew Spanish, at the age of 26. And I also ended up going back to my middle school and being the guest speaker to give a guest speech at my middle school, and I did it in English and Spanish. But other than that, like, it wasn't that great. So like for the next 7 years after I left my little maestros, I'm gonna call this period of my teaching like education or teaching BC. And this was before Q. It was pretty much the representations I had. Here, I'll go back. I see you trying to take that picture. Oh. There you go. I got you. The representation I had of a classroom was the same rows, cemetery style seating, focused on the teacher that's doing the lecturing. That's what I was doing. That's what I knew. My professional development was a version of educational malpractice, being brainwashed into this I do, we do, you do. But that's what I knew. So I was contributing to something that I just learned recently called the pedagogy of poverty. That Martin Haberman calls this, because when we're afraid, when we think our students are not ready to do the thinking, the talking, the math, the reasoning on their own, we do it for them. And that's what I was doing. But that's what I knew. My lesson plans, BC, forget about it, man. I was going lockstep through each section using my textbooks as crutches. That's what I knew. That's all I knew. I didn't know how to go off-road and shed this. the PLC that I had, the representation that I had of that, it wasn't really that popular back then, and not like it's a big buzzword now, but it was pretty much the lunchroom, and it was pretty toxic. I would walk in, oh yeah, you? And then walk right out, because I'm like, dude, I ain't trying to hear that stuff. So I would just go in my room, but I was struggling, man. I was struggling. I was not reaching the kids. I would sit there, grab my lunch, and I would grab my tacos. And I would eat my tacos marinated with tapatio and tears, man, I'm telling you. And I would ask myself questions like, maybe, am I a teacher person? Maybe this is not meant for me. I thought I was supposed to be great. I watched Stand and Deliver 10 times before I started teaching. I ended up not being so great. But then one day in 2012, I was in San Diego. And something changed. Because I needed something. I didn't know what I needed. And I saw her. The sound? The sound on the computer? No? Yeah? Oh, there we go. Man, she was beautiful. So, but the funny thing about that, the way that we met was quite the accident. It wasn't a Q event. I went to this thing called ISTE. Woo! And I ended up being in this one room, and I was like, man, this ISTE is the bomb. But what I ended up really digging and finding out is that it was Q that I was digging because I spent time in the Q room. So I was learning from a bunch of Q people all day, and I just stayed in that room. I was like, these people get it. I like it. I'm down. Let's go. So we did an iPhoneography class with Nicole Delicio, so I learned what the heck a hashtag is and started my Instagram account at Ed Campos Jr., by the way. You can follow me, start tweet. I learned Google Sheets from the spreadsheet queen, Alice Keeler. And then I went to this session, the last one, which blew my mind. This guy named John Carippo, you guys may know. Yeah, looking at Thug Life picture right there. And I learned how to unchain myself from the front of the room using an iPad and Apple TV. And that blew my mind. And I don't know if you felt like this or what your first Q day felt like, but mine felt like this. Can I get 2 fingers up if you felt like this after a day of Q stuff right here? I'm ready to go. I just leveled up. I can use this stuff tomorrow. You didn't give me a gigantic binder that I'm immediately going to throw in the garbage. So after that, things changed because Q showed me, man, you can represent PD in a different way. It can be fun. I can make connections because I can relate to how useful it is and the useful representations, and I can elevate my perception of what PD can be and pull different pieces out of it because I can learn something useful that I can use on the next day with my students. So I love the way Q represents professional development. And after that, it was on. I attended all the Q things, right? I would like to say that I started sipping the Q-Laid, but I was slurping. I was slurping the Q-Laid. I'm not even messing around. I went to the fall Q, the spring Q, the Q Rockstar, the Q Bold. If Q had a knitting conference or some crap, sign me up. I'll go, whatever you got. Yoga with goats or something like that, let's do it. But the best thing I ever learned at Q, and they're probably gonna kick me off right now, has nothing to do with technology. Nothing to do with tech. It was spring Q 2013, I was walking through the hallway and I saw a poster session by a kindergarten teacher who had painted his student desks with whiteboard paint and then his teacher door with whiteboard paint. And I was like, oh, damn. That's nice. So I took some pictures of that, and I took it back to my students and asked them some questions. Should I paint the desk and door? They're like, you should paint everything, Mr. Campos, just paint it all. So what I did next is, real nice timing, I was able to help write a grant. I recruited my little sister. And we made a tribute to Walt and Jesse White and painted my classroom because I wanted a break from bad teaching practices.
Look over yonder. What do you see? The sun is rising, most definitely. A new day's coming.
I love this song, sorry.
People are changing. Ain't it beautiful?
So me and my sister painted my classroom, and it changed the game. A new day was coming for sure. And people were changing, and I was changing, and more importantly, my students were changing. Because then, what I expected out of teaching started happening, teaching and learning. There were so many amazing things that just happened by this simple thing of painting and putting whiteboard space on the classroom. And I didn't change much. I ended up changing more, but that was the low floor for me. If I did that, that was the game changer for me. I had more fun at work. Kids were trying harder. They were collaborating organically. I didn't need to put them in pairs or do them in some elbow partner mumbo jumbo stuff that nobody does in real life. They embraced the mistakes because it was dry erase. They were focused more. They asked more questions from me, but even more importantly, they asked more questions from each other, and they were co-crafting their learning together because it was their learning. They took more risks. The feedback was amazing. Kids, I started hearing things like, I like coming to this class. It doesn't even seem like a math class. Like, this is awesome. Class goes by really fast now. It's already 2 hours up. We had a 2-hour block. 2 hours of math went by like that. And why aren't all math classes like this? Parents would ask that too when they would come. I wish my math class was like that. I converted a pedagogy of poverty into a pedagogy of prosperity by releasing the thinking and the writing and the reasoning to my kids. Let it go. And they got up out of their seats. They were able to do the math. It became their classroom. I started to learn a lot about these kids. Like, wow, these kids are artists too. Like when they're done with their math, they were doodling. They're like, hey, can we come in? We want to prep the classroom for back to school night. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. These kids went to town wanting to showcase their classroom to their parents. That was the easiest back to school night I ever did. I just sat back. Future mathematicians and artists. And I also learned about the multiple representations of a PLC. So getting away from that toxic environment in the break room, Q showed me that this energy that I have at Q when I love this, it doesn't have to stop because I can get connected on this thing called Twitter, which is not just for following Kardashians, which I don't give a damn about. But that there's a bunch of really awesome educators on there sharing dope stuff. And I'm like, I want some of that. So these guys helped me level up. And now the representation of a teacher that I was giving my students was actually all of these brilliant minds inside me. And I was sharing that with them. And that was fun and that was empowering. From Peter Liljedahl to Joe to Matt Vaudry to John Stevens to Fawn Wynn to my buddy Jeremiah. This helped me throw down my textbook crutches and give me confidence that I have some skill to add to this profession that we call teaching. And even more importantly, what I learned is that as awesome as these people are, I am not Joe, I am not Peter, I am not Matt, I am not John, Fawn, or Jeremiah. But I am me, And I've got some special orange sauce that I could sprinkle on my pedagogy that nobody else has. Can I get 2 fingers up from you guys if you attended some sessions and you're like, dude, I could do that, but I could do that better with my style. Yeah, you got that. We need that, right? The best things that have happened was from these sessions and remixing them. I'm gonna put my spin on it. So what I started to do is I learned how to defront the classroom with Matt Vaudry's music cues. And so Matt Vaudry says, use music cues to save your teacher voice, which you can see I'm like getting cotton mouth right now, and get your kids to do stuff based on music. So they trains them to do that, right? So when I wanted them to get up and work on the walls,
Get up, stand
I
up,
would include my friend Bob,
stand up for your right.
and they knew time to get up and work on the wall.
Stand up for your right.
When I wanted them to move 2 whiteboard workstations over, I would call Queen Bee.
To the left, to the left.
I'm just sitting there with my phone,
To the left,
and they're moving. Not mad, not having to repeat myself 20 times.
to the left, to the left.
Then we did a gallery walk. Let's look at all the students learning before we debrief so you can glean ideas from everyone and do that. So I had to go old school. Call my Run DMC and Aerosmith to help me out with that one. And then when I wanted to bring it back, I had to take them old school. They didn't like this one, but then they ended up liking this song.
Welcome back. Your dreams were your ticket out. Welcome back.
Let's talk about all the math we just did.
Same old place that you.
And one of my students, Danny, he's like, Mr. Campos, I see what you're doing. You think you're pretty clever, that to the left stuff. He goes, how about if you play this song when we do group work? Oh, it didn't play? Did it not play? Oh, it's good. Don't worry, it comes up again. Just think about, Danny recommended it. So also what this did is, from Peter Liljedahl's idea about defronting the classroom so you can do more, ask better questions, that helped me shift my mind. Is like, as much lesson planning was doing, I wanted to do as much question planning about like their misconceptions and when to ask the right question about the math. But also just about them. Because freeing me up from the classroom allowed me to get around a little bit more. Like I think the famous SFQ member, I think this kind of sums up what we do as Q members. We absorb what is useful, we reject what is useless, and we add what is specifically our own. We know we've been to a lot of useless PD, we absorb a lot of good stuff here at Q, but we need to add specifically what our own is with this orange sauce, whatever we got. Oh, let's get that. I had a Spicoli-ish student. Do you know the Spicoli-ish? You probably have some. And we were testing in class one time, and he was like, what gets taught in here? And I said, it's, what do you think? He says, I think it's art or music. I said, no, but it's similar. It's math. It's just as creative as a topic, right? Because kids deserve a creative space that, it can be a math class, whatever content, music, culture, poetry, art, right? All the things that make them up. This is their classroom. And it allowed me to check for understanding instead of before when trying to do this, which was I couldn't see anything, right? This is just for someone to walk in and check a box. But to get in there and check for understanding like a boss. To get in there and then get my steps in. Because I'm like, ooh. I'm like at 10,000 already. So how often do we check for our own understanding sometimes of our kids? Sorry. You know? But when do we have time? I know you're like, yeah, I want to, but I don't have time. Because the enemy is that someone's taking our time. And it's happening a lot in these PLCs. Because they're having us look at one representation of a kid when we know there's so much more? Just like I'm gonna have my buddy Bruce
How did it feel to you?
explain this again.
Let me think. Don't think. Feel. It is like a finger pointing away to the moon. Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory.
If we keep simplifying our students to one representation and focusing on the finger, that their data, we're gonna miss all the heavenly glory that teaching, learning, and our students have to give to us and teach to us. We can give them, and if you're gonna collect data, there's other types, there's other representations. We can use qualitative like Google Forms. What helps reduce your anxiety in this math class? It's more relaxed. We still learn, but we're not stressing over tests. We focus on the material and then some test. When I get major anxiety flares, I can draw on the desks. I like that. That's better than any test score I've ever seen. I feel better to do on the walls because I can move around and do more with the classroom. This makes me so much calmer and less stressed out. We want that data too. Let's collect that data too, at the very least, if we're gonna be forced to collect this other data. Why should more math classes be like this? I'm just gonna read the last one because I'm over time right now. But if a math class gives the students the opportunity to do more than be lectured, then we're more interested in learning. If we students are more interested in learning, then we'll be most likely to do better in school and have the chance for a brighter future. And if students have a chance for a brighter future, then so does America. So I'm gonna leave you with lessons from a former pocho. Lessons learned from a former pocho, a rehabilitated pocho, okay? But I'm gonna do it in the form of music cues. Represent for your students.
Linden Boulevard, represent.
And represent yourself as an artist, as a teacher that can remix
in my hand, I'm never hesitant.
whatever
My favorite
lessons
jam
you
back in
learn.
the day was ever to be for president.
Defront the classroom and unchain yourself so that you can have more opportunity to ask your students questions about the content, but
You listen to
also,
the sounds of breathe.
about them.
There ain't no future in your front.
Do question planning. Look ahead, think about what your kids are struggling with, and think about what questions you're gonna ask.
It's the questions, it's the questions, boy, it's the questions, it's the questions, come on, the questions.
And play music in class, right? Play music.
One good thing about music when it hits you. I say one good thing about
Because there's been
music
too much
when it
pain in
hits
math
you.
classes, I know, for teachers and for students. And at the very least, we can have them learn to a rhythm and learn to a beat.
Hit me with music now.
And then whiteboard everything.
I see a rector and I want it painted.
White. Sorry, I couldn't. I did pretty good up until that one. You can't struggle. So the last one I'm gonna leave you with is from my friend, my former cousin Danny, that said, hey, when you want to have group work, you should do this. And the last lesson is join Q, stay together, All right, I'm gonna give you a different representation of my keynote that I could have saved you guys like 40 minutes from right now.
All right, we need you guys to just
Have you ever met a teacher that wasn't that great because their teaching and practice was so out of date? Well, let me tell you the story of my situation when I first met this badass Q organization. The way that I joined was quite the accident. ISTE 2012, I'm glad I went. I learned hashtags and Instagram from Nicole. Spreadsheets from Keeler, man, I was on a roll. Next was the iPad Swiss Army knife dude. He used AirPlay to unchain me from the front of the room. I asked him his name, he said John Edu Protocol. He said you should come to this thing we call Q Rockstar.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I was pretty enthused, so I looked at the sched and started to peruse. Attended like mad from near to far, learning from Alice Chin, Diane Main, and JR. I could tell that these Q folks were a different breed, and I thought to myself, man, this is exactly what I need.
Yes.
I know you need it too.
Yeah.
What I need is some help with this chorus. You know what I'm going? You got what I need, and I'm thankful to no end for the time we get to spend. Oh, baby, you got what I need, and I'm thankful to no end for the time we get to spend. I took John's word for it at this time, attended all the Q things, and it felt sublime. I gained some new friends, now that's a fact, like Lindsay Blass and Cosma and Bill Selak. Q showed me that school doesn't have to be boring. I felt renewed and inspired to change my story. I switched up my style and started improving, put whiteboards everywhere and got these kids moving. Got these kids up doing math on their feet. You should share that, John, you should send out a tweet.
Yeah.
Started presenting, everything was all cool. Trying to change the way math feels in schools. It's crazy how you can go from being an introvert teacher to Q Rockstar presenter and then fall keynote speaker.
That is happening. Yes, sir.
That's happening. Woo! You might be next. Now, as I stand here and look at all these beautiful faces from all these different backgrounds and diverse places, the one thing that I know more to be true is the more than we need Q, Q needs me and you. Q, we got what you need. I'm grateful to no end. And Q needs you. Oh, baby, Q, we got what you need. And I know this much is true. Q needs me and Q needs you. Q, you got what I need. And I know this much is true. Q needs me and Q needs you.
Give it up for Ed. Give it up for Ed. Give it up. He put his heart and soul into this.
Thank you guys so much. Q needs us. Q needs you guys. Go out, represent for you, for your students. We got an extra bonus. If you want, Whitebook is gonna share and give some discounts, and I got some to give away to help put whiteboards on your classroom. And they sponsored 250 tacos at lunch at 11:45, so make it over there. Let's keep these spicy conversations going. Plenty of orange sauce to go around. I love you guys. I love Q. Thank you.
Hey, we got a couple more gifts.
Yep. Thank you guys.